Jayajit, and of course, I missed out construction, but I didn't miss out you. So your smart city, smart nation is very nice.
Yeah, no, thank you, Arvind. And by no ways am I representing the government. I've been working closely with the government for more than 2 decades. I've been involved in the policy making on IoT by 2 different departments under the same ministry. So there are 2 different policies on IoT. One is called M2M under DOT, and then there is one policy under DAT. The policies essentially look at sensors, application, and decision making. So that's the entire gamut that of issues that the government is looking at. The other conversation that we missed out in terms of horizontal, Arvind, is not just construction, which is a vertical industry, but the sensors itself. There is a huge amount of focus on the material sciences, on the sensors itself, and there will be a need for a different set of materials to make sure that the sensors appropriate for our conditions are created and sold to other countries which have similar conditions. And therefore, there is also a focus and incentive on exports of IoT from India, and exports of all kinds, including sensors itself. What the government is looking at is a $15 billion industry by 2020. And they will be working towards that, because that's what each of the bureaucrats will be held on to. The ministries will be held on to that target of $15 billion, which includes all of these subsectors of IoT. So clearly there will be opportunities that will be coming from the government, which will force this industry to get created. What are the issues that they're looking at? They're looking at the verticals of agriculture, health, water quality, natural disasters, transportation, security, automobile, supply chain, smart cities, automated metering, monitoring of utilities, waste management, oil and gas. These are the ones that have been called out, and they will be focused on that. I'll be going through details on some of these. But the 5 pillars by which the government is going to support IoT is: 1, incentives and engagements, which includes a fund that's going to be put together under the Electronic Development Fund, and there is significant money being put into that. How it will get dispersed, those mechanisms are still getting worked out. There will be a R&D and innovation support that will be coming in. That's the second pillar. There's about 125 crores that's already been allocated for that. The projects will be allocated on a PPP basis, so it's not going to be grants given, but PPP basis projects. It's a significant change from what has been happening till now. What has been happening is that the government decides that they will invent or create some technology, give it to CSIR or one of the government labs, and they're somewhere in the labyrinth of time and files, those projects get lost. Even if some commercially viable technology comes up, it doesn't see the light of the day of commercialization per se. The change is that the government is going to give those funds to private sector to develop the technology and take it to a commercial end. So that's a significant change that has happened. Many of you can leverage that. The third pillar is capacity building and incubation, which is mostly to do with the universities. I will not go into the details of it, but also with private sector training that will be involved. The fourth thing is demonstration center, and the fifth thing is HRD. And all of this leading to a set of standards that will be emanating from India. The key value that the government is looking at is essentially standards as a differentiator and a disruptor. And therefore, it's a very powerful tool for startups in India to latch on to the standards bandwagon. The government is investing significantly to be part of the committees in IEEE, to get Indian government representatives elected on those committees, so that your standards can be pushed forward and can be converted into internationally accepted standards, which is a much larger market than just India per se. The other larger point that the government wants to communicate, and what we also want to push forward, is the fact that many of the conversations that are happening are not happening in the context of India per se again. The Indian requirements, we have heard that umpteen number of times and ad nauseum, are different. But the challenge happens that even when we are sitting here in India and we are looking at Indian problems, we see them with a different lens altogether. We filter out the problems on the ground. Let me take a few examples. Smart health. And I'm taking government program examples so that one can relate to them. We've heard a lot of the smart health initiatives going on. Couple of trends in India. We will be having a large amount of graying that will happen in India. Yes, we are the youngest population in the world, but we'll also have the largest population of old people just because of the size of our population. Now they cannot afford to be in hospitals. They will grow old, they will need hospitalization. Can we have IoT supporting them and providing them healthcare at home, connecting their vitals to a centralized server so that they can be catered to? We have heard of MMR, IMR being the primary objectives: maternal mortality rates, infant mortality rates, female feticides. These are large problems. How many of us are thinking about creating a solution for these, which links back to a societal development and nation building? One can easily put together vests which have these sensors in it, which can then start tracking from the day the government provides the support to the pregnant lady from the first trimester onwards. And these vests can monitor the health of the baby. And if the baby does not go through a full term, then check what was the gender of the baby, and therefore multiple issues gets checked marked, whether there's female feticide happening, whether MMR is happening, and what's the rate of MMR, can that be stopped, what were the environmental issues around it, can one check the pollution along with the health belt that this lady is wearing. It also supports the surrogacy industry, if one can call that as an industry. That's one example. I'll take a few examples. And we talked about smart cities. There are a lot of things happening in smart cities. Let me just pick up one example: smart parking, because many of you sitting here, I'm sure, who have invested into IoT or doing a startup on IoT, is also having an eye on smart parking, because the moment we say smart city, the first thing that comes up is Wi-Fi and then smart parking. Now, what are the solutions that are coming up? And since I'm dealing with smart city on a day in and day out basis, the solutions coming out are that I'll have a sensor under the parking lot, and the sensor will detect whether a car is parked, and I'll have an app. Before you come out of the home, you can book your parking slot and come to that place and park it. So if you are in Connaught Place or in this area, you can come from Karol Bagh. Before you leave your house, you can block your parking slot and come here. Guess what? None of it works. The first point, if you block your parking space at home, somebody comes and park it over here, nobody can stop it. There is no police support to any of this. The second is, there is no parking bay per se concept. There are parking lots where you can thrust your car wherever you can find, and you can put your car in. And that's not going to help when you got a sensor in hand. The sensor can't go around measuring where you've put your car in. And therefore, inventorization of the parking lot becomes the first step before even you put these sensors in. The third and bigger problem is that in the absence of all of these technologies, you got a large mafia working out there. So I can talk about it in public, but it's a well-known fact. The mafia will make sure that your smart quote-unquote parking never works. The rates will be fiddled around with. They'll put a parking rate of 10 rupees when your actual rate should be 100 rupees. And they're themselves getting 200 rupees because they will only report 1 out of 20 cars parked. And therefore, they'll be getting a disproportionate benefit, but you will not be getting anything out of it. The business models have not been worked out. The operational models have not been worked out. The policy models have not been worked out. And those needs to be worked out in order to get aligned to the opportunities that exist in the Indian market. And there are many opportunities. I talked about the previous opportunity, and I'm now talking about issues that are there. If you look at Swachh Bharat and Amrut, the problem that's happening on the ground is that tenders are going out separately for the toilet, separately for the septic tank or the sewage system, and separately for the water. And guess what? The three of them are coming up in 3 different locations at 3 different points in time, and they're not integrated. So at the end of the day, money is getting spent, but we don't know whether the outcome, that is the toilet is being used or not, is happening or not. Can IoT play a role? Clearly it can play a role. Can you put a sensor to figure out whether water is going through the system? And if that goes through, that can be reported back, and toilet by toilet can be monitored. As long as we keep the cost low, and as long as the standards that we're talking about in terms of consuming the bandwidth and the power required to do that is something that's manageable. Having said that, we have set up a smart toilet at Rafi Marg. If you get time, please go to Patel Chowk Railways, the metro station, and you will see the Rafi Marg smart toilet there. What's the smartness being put over there? We've got an ATM to make sure that there is a financial sustainability to the toilet. So the bank which has given the loan has also put an ATM in the toilet, and then the cost of the toilet and the loan is been borne by the bank itself by giving the monthly rental. There's also an operational sustainability issue because the O&M cost of a toilet is the same as a capital cost. And therefore, it's very, very expensive to have public toilets, which is why you see dirty toilets around. One can say that we can charge people who use the toilet, But if you start charging people, especially in the demonetized era, you can very well bet that the people will not use the toilet and will use the walls. The whole purpose of public toilet in a smart city is that people should not use the walls and should use the toilet. And therefore you cannot charge the people. So what do? What we have done is we have put up a path lab into the toilet so that the path lab then fights with the toilet guy to make sure that there is absolute hygiene maintained, there is no smell, and there is an operational sustainability coming in because money keeps coming in on a monthly basis. There is a flower shop, there is a ice cream shop, there is a water ATM, and all of that makes sure that the place is extremely hygienic. The toilet is built like a 5-star hotel. Now what's smart about it? Where can you insert a sensor? The point is there's a smart toilet with no smartness in it, no technology in it. You can't insert a sensor in it. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we are having a hammer in our hand. We are saying we've got IoT. Now let's see where we can hammer it in. Now every place is not some place where you can put an IoT. What one needs to do is find out the value chain, find out what the issues are, and then see where the IoT can be pumped in. Let me look at smart agriculture as the one last problem area. Again, one can put in the sensors in any which ways, but why will the government support a sensor which might lead to more agricultural productivity? There is no political return on it. There is no taxation return on it because agriculture is not taxed. But on the other hand, if you look at the whole farm insurance that has been promised by the government, you can't have farm insurance unless you monitor whether anything was planted at all or not in a conducive environment. And if at all the crop has failed, how do you know that the crop has failed? How do you know that millions of acres of land has failed or not failed? That is where IoT starts coming in, because there is a business model around it where you make sure that your farm output and your farm insurance is not defrauded and there is no leakage in the subsidies, and therefore there is a benefit to the government in that sense. There are a few more examples I can put in. Warfare as an example. I don't know how many of us are actually spending time and effort in building up IoT solutions for the military. It will be a huge consumer of IoT, and it's pretty open at this stage to start consuming some of these technologies. In short, what we are driving at is the technology models has to be accompanied by sustainable business models, something that you've heard again and again. But in the larger government context, which is 20% of the procurer in the Indian situation, one has to tag it back to the government's business model, which then links back to the operational model that is acceptable to the government. It cannot be an operational model which goes against the procurement norms of the government, and that has to be supported through appropriate regulatory models, and all of it has to come under a appropriate policy model which still is evolving as we are speaking. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Jayajit. So Jayajit made 3 points on which, thanks. So one is on the standards thing, which is an important, I'll come back to it. But on the geriatric care, there are 2 startups which are focusing, but they are getting funded from Japan. That's where the focus is, not yet India. It will happen. On the defense, there is a lot better news. There are many startups. In the public domain, one of the largest, most successful revenue generating startup for IoT is actually focused on the defense area. I don't know how many of you have heard of Tonbo Imaging. They have $100 million from the army. It just happens to be the Peruvian army, not the Indian army. We are working on getting the Indian army to use the technology. And there are other stuff like IdeaForge, etc. But let me now switch. I will have some questions, and I think we are good for time. We will be able to take some questions from you, so have it ready. For those of you suffering from postprandial drowsiness, please wake up. Now the most important question. Assuming you got a $100 million fund and you are the managing partner of the fund, which sector would you want to invest in? Not as Cisco, personally.
Understood. If I am looking for a quick return on my investment, some consumer application is what I would go for. If I am looking to profit big over the longer term, industrial use cases, manufacturing.
Nimesh.
Because it has to be for nation building and it has to elevate that section which is very, very poor, I'll be biased in my approach. I'll put it in construction.
You're not going to get a VC fund. Jayajit.
I'll definitely not invest in government. In the short run, it's challenging. I'll definitely put it into industrial and infrastructure, including ports, and we are already earning a lot from those sectors.
Yeah, thanks. Rajan.
I would put 50 million each in construction and agriculture.
All right. We will come back and take a poll from where you guys want to put money. But let me ask the next question. See, one of the things when we started the IoT forum, and being an entrepreneur, we went around and spoke to people, but every corporate sponsor I talked to wanted to talk about standards and whether we will help make standards happen. And being new, I come from a software background, didn't understand. But I think it now, I do understand. So the question is, what is the way you can get customers to buy when they feel, a lot of customers feel their standards are not there? How do they invest? If they select something and then something else becomes standardized, is it mature? Should you wait or should you invest? So this is a question which plays out, and it also has the role of standards. I will ask Dr. Jayajit first.
No, absolutely important. Let me just take one use case again, because it has to be looked at in a business context. It costs about 6 to 8 rupees to collect the meter information. And we have been talking about smart metering. That's been the poster boy of IoT. You can't have smart metering unless you got the right set of standards in place for low power, long distance communication. And for that, the right set of standards, right set of spectrum, right amount of spectrum has to be put into place. Different kinds of networks will have different kinds of standard requirement. You will have networks within your body. You'll have networks right around your body, which is personal area networks. You'll have networks outside, which would be the metering kind of long distance one, city-wide networks. Each one of them will have a different set of standards needed. You will have standards needed for within home and so on and so forth. Unless we have that in place, it'll be extremely difficult to create any sustainable business.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will take questions offline. We are around.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for that. A quick round of applause, please, for these gentlemen and the conversation that they had around IoT.